All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. I'm sorry for the delay, having some technical difficulties. Begin by thanking our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz. Rabbi Naftali Tilson of Yisroel for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month, commemorating the yahrzeit of his parents, Rabbi Yona ben Avraham Leyb and Rivka bas Ya'akov. We thank our week of learning sponsors, Binyamin Ilana Levin, in honor of the birth of a granddaughter, Liora Sarah Levin, Tova NessAiver, for the schus that the entire Meretz Hashem we should continue to learn together. Kila can learn together, Shurim should learn together, Meretz Hashem. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, memory of Michael Judelson and his beloved father, Perry Judelson, Zichron Levrach, Lou and Edie Goldberg, commemoration of the yahrzeit, and memory of Edie's father, Yisroel Dov, ben Shmuel Zichron Levrach, and we dedicate our learning in the schus of Refuah Shlema for Zechariah Dov ben Perel Shira. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, he together with Kol Cholei Yisrael will have a complete and enduring refuah. But so with that, let us begin. And thank Rabbi Richter for giving all of the shiurim and drush, for giving the daf over the last couple of days. Baruch Hashem, this mic, I don't know, it's not, doesn't seem to be working. This one, thank you. So I'll say, so let's begin in Meretz Hashem. Today's daf is Mem Gimel. We're going to pick up 6 lines up from the bottom on Mem Beis Amud Beis, 42b. So 6 lines up. Yibayluhu. Eved shemachar rabo leknas machar eino machar. So we'll say, very interesting case. What happens in the following scenario? What happens if halacha l'mais you have an Eved Kanani, and the master ends up going ahead and selling the servant for the potential of kinas. Now, what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Shemachar rabo leknas. Rashi is 4 lines up from the bottom. Shemachar rabo li'achar. Suppose imagine the following situation. Ruvain owns an Eved Kanani. Reuven owns an Eved Kanani. And what does he do? He goes ahead and, now, what's the halach with an Eved Kanani? If an Eved Kanani is gored by someone else's shar, by someone else's ox, there's a knas, there's a penalty payment. And what happens? Halacha l'maisa, that penalty payment gets paid to the owner. So essentially what the owner is doing is, he's selling a future option. Right? He's selling in the event that my Eved gets gored, and there is a payment, and there is a penalty payment. The penalty payment will go to you, Shimon. So can Ruvain, the owner of the Eved, go ahead and pay a future, or go ahead and sell a potential future penalty payment payable to Shimon? That's the question. So the Gemara says, Oino machar, or does it not work? Now what is this? What is this seemingly a question of? Rashi says over here, Olo machar, vim nagach knasa l'rabo rishon, De'ein adam makne davar shelo bali olam. Now we'll say, what is this a question of? So on a basic level, this is a question of adam makne davar shebali olam or shelo bali olam. In other words, does a person have the ability to be makne? Does a person have the ability to convey ownership of something that does not yet exist? That's the question over here. Can I sell something that has not yet come into existence? Right? If I'm right, Ruvain has a potential right. If an ox gores his Eved, he is entitled to a knas. The difference is that knas doesn't yet exist. Can you sell something? Can you sell? Again, we'll say this is a shaila in halach in general. Can you sell a davar shelo bali olam? So the Gemara says following. The Gemara says, Tibai the Rabbi Meir, Tibai the Rabbanon. So this is a question according to Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon. And I remember, this is a general machlokes. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that says, Adam makne davar shelo bali olam. Now I will say, where does Rabbi Meir's shita come up? So interesting enough, Rashi quotes this, right? If you look at the second line from the bottom of Rashi, the Amar Adam makne davar shelo bali olam, ha'omer li'isha, hare'at mikudeshes li l'chisha es gayer. So I'll say an interesting case. If a man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to me when I convert. When I convert. So does such a kiddushin work or not? That is an example of a davar shelo bali olam. Remember, he has not yet converted. So to speak, the Jew in him does not yet exist. Can you create a situation of kiddushin like that? Rabbi Meir holds yes. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that Adam makne davar shelo bali olam. The Rabbanon say you can't. So watch this. So the Gemara says, so Tibai the Rabbi Meir, Tibai the Rabbanon. So the Gemara says, Tibai the Rabbi Meir, ad kolokam Rabbi Meir, Adam makne davar shelo bali olam, elakagon peros dekel da avidi da asu. So I will say, when does Rabbi Meir say, for example, that you could be makna, that you can convey ownership of something that doesn't yet exist? A good example of this would be peros dekel, fruits of a palm tree. I could sell the future fruits of the palm tree even though they don't yet exist. Now, what's the logic with that? Because the palm tree exists. Even though the fruits are not yet in existence, they have not come into fruition, but Lamaisa, the tree exists. So because the tree exists, I have the ability to be makna the future fruit. Aval hocha miyemar demingach. Rabbi over here, who says that my Eved is ever going to get gored? Vimtim solomar demingach, and ultimately, again, even if the Eved gets gored, mimai demishalim. Who says I'm going to be entitled to payment? Now, why wouldn't I be entitled to payment? Top of Mem Gimel, Dilma mode umiftar. Maybe halacha lamaisa, and I will say there's a concept by Knas of mode b'Knas pater. And actually, very interesting halacha that if somebody is liable to a penalty payment, and they go ahead and they admit to the penalty payment, then halacha l'maisa, they are pater. They are exempt, ultimately, again, from the penalty payment. Kansa mode b'knas pater. So who says, in other words, even if so number one, who says my Eved is ever going to get gored? That's number one. Number two, even if the Eved is gored, maybe the perpetrator ultimately will go ahead and admit in Beis Din before being found guilty, in which case they are exempt from paying. Furthermore, it's kash according to Rabbanon. Ad kan komi Rabbanon ein adam makna dar shalab ali olam elikagom peros dekal dahashta mialesno. Furthermore, even the Rabbanon, right? The Rabbanon are the ones who say that a person cannot be makna a davar shalab ali olam. You can't go ahead and convey ownership of something that does not yet exist. When do they say that? For example, in the case of the fruits of the tree, where you can't be makna the fruits before they exist, because, again, they don't yet exist. However, aval hacha ha-kai shar v'ha-kai eved. But over here, interestingly enough, the shar exists. In other words, technically speaking, the shar, the ox that would gore the eved, technically exists in the world. V'ha-kai eved. And the Eved exists. So we'll say, what is the halacha? So therefore, that's the question of the Gemara. So a fascinating idea. Ruvain owns the Eved. Can Ruvain sell the future right? Thank you. Can Ruvain sell the future right? Sorry. So we'll say, so can Ruvain sell the future right of the penalty payment of the goring of the Eved to Shimon? Okay, does he have the ability to do that? That's the Shaila. So the Gemara says as follows: Am Rabbi Abba Tashma. So we'll say we are now in Mem Gimel Amid Aleph 43a, 5 lines down from the top. So Am Rabbi Abba Tashma. The Yelid bias. Shabbos says it's actually interesting. So the Torah speaks about it over here as follows: who has the ability to go ahead and eat truma in the house of a Kohen? So the Torah says as follows: the Kohen ki yikne nefesh kinyan kaspo. If a Kohen acquires someone, kinyan kaspo, someone acquired by money, hu yochal bo, he has the ability to eat truma. The Yelid beso, someone born into the Kohen's home, heim yochlu balachmo. They have the ability to eat of the Kohanic bread, i.e. of truma. So again, just to be very clear on our question, we are looking to know, can Ruvain, the owner of an Eved Kanani, sell a future penalty payment that may be due to him that would come as a result of an ox goring his Eved Kanani? So we're really starting off this morning with a very, very specific type of question. So we'll say, but what we've essentially done is, we've framed this question as part of a much bigger issue, which is, can a person be makna a davar shelo bali olam? Can you assign or sell a future right that does not yet exist? Okay, so now the Gemara is saying, let's answer this. How are we going to answer it? Through truma. Torah says, who is allowed to eat truma? Two people. Someone who's born into a Kohen's home, yilid bayis umikna kesef, someone acquired by money. So the Gemara says, ma tamalomar, im kinyan kesef ochel, yilid bayis l'koshkin. Both say, if somebody who is acquired by money by the Kohen could eat truma, so certainly someone born into the Kohen's home has the ability to eat truma. To which the Gemara says, ilu kina yisi omer, ma kinyan kesef sheyesh bo shava kesef ochel. I would have thought as follows: just like a shava kesef, someone who is someone Makinyan kesef. Someone who was acquired by money means he has a value of at least, right? He has some value. So too Yilid Bayis. Only someone born into the home of the Kohen, sheyesh bo shava kesef, ultimately who has value, has the ability to eat. They'll say, how do we know that if someone is born into the home of the Kohen, he has the ability to go ahead and eat truma even if he doesn't have a value? Talmud Lomar Yilid Bayis Mikol Makom. The pasuk says Yilid Bayis, someone born into the home of the Kohen, Mikol Makom. In other words, Rabbi says so that even if someone is born into the home of the Kohen, even if he doesn't have any value, so to speak, monetary value, he could still eat. V'adayin Omer, still I would say Yilid Bayis. It is true. If you're born into the house of a Kohen, so ultimately, again, whether you have a value or don't have a monetary value, you could eat truma. However, kinyan kesef yesh bo shava kesef ochel, ebo shava kesef eino ochel. But I will say, ultimately, if someone is acquired by the Kohen, it's only if he has a value that he has the ability to go ahead and that he has the ability to eat truma, but if he doesn't have a value, he doesn't eat truma. Talmud Lomar, kinyan kaspo v'yilid beso. Therefore, I will say the Torah equates these two individuals: someone who is owned by the Kohen, kinyan kaspo, acquired by the Kohen, and yilid beso, someone born into the Kohen's home. Ma yilid bayis afa pi she'ino shave klum. I will say, just like if the Kohen has a member of his household who doesn't have a financial value, right, born into his household, but that person could go ahead and eat truma. So too, af kinyan kaspo, af al pi she'ino shave klum ochel. So too, someone ultimately, again, who is acquired by the Kohen, even if that person does not have a monetary value, still goes ahead and is able to eat truma. So we'll say, so just to compartmentalize this piece. So remember again, what's our overarching question? Our overarching question is, can you go ahead and assign a davar shalab ali olam? That's the shaila. How does it specifically manifest itself over here? Can the owner, we'll call him Ruvain, can Ruvain, the owner of an Eved Kinani, sell the future, right? Sell the future right of the goring penalty that would be due to him if an ox of another Jew would gore his Eved Kinani. Can Ruvain sell that? And by the way, I will say, I just want to point out, remember, you could sell it because it's a knas. Because it's a knas, it's a fixed amount, right? That's, remember again, another piece. In halacha, there are two different types of financial penalties, right? There's kesef. Kesef means monetary restitution, which is fundamentally dependent on the value of the victim, versus knas, which is a fixed amount. The amount that you get when your Eved Kinani is gored by an ox is a fixed amount. So can Ruvain go ahead and sell that potential future right to Shimon? Good. So I'll say, so now how are we answering it? The Gemara raises the case of Truma. What do we just see by Truma? There are two different kinds of people who are entitled to eat Truma. Kinyan Kasef and Yilid Bayis. If either you are born into the home of a Kohen, right, or you are financially owned by a Kohen. So I'll say the Gemara equates those two to say as follows: that just like someone who is born into the home of the Kohen, even if he has quote unquote no financial value, he's allowed to eat truma. So too, someone who's king and kaspo acquired by the Kohen, even if he has no financial value, could also eat truma. Okay, now watch this. Why is this important to us? I will say, if you think that you have the ability to go ahead and sell the future goring rights, right, the future goring penalty of an evet to someone else, so mi'ika avda delo mizdaben leknasa, Shabbos say, so that would mean there's no such thing as an evet who doesn't have a value, right? To us, it's very interesting, right? The Gemara is talking about a case over here of someone who's a kinyan kaspo, acquired by or financially owned by the master, who doesn't have a financial value. Even he could go ahead and eat truma. But one second. If you're allowed to sell the potential knas that you would get if your evet is gored, then I will say, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? There is no such thing as an evet who doesn't have a value, because I could always sell that future right. The fact that the Gemara says that there is such a thing as an evet who doesn't have a value must mean that what? you can't sell that future goring knas, right? You can't sell that future financial right. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not true. In Ika Avda Treifa, we will say you could have an Eved who is a Treifa. I will say now, watch this. What does it mean an Eved who is a Treifa? Treifa means someone has some type of physical ailment, a physical condition, from which they are going to imminently die. Right now, the definition of imminent is a little bit subject to machlokes as well, but for our purposes right now, let's just call it imminent. So we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, if you have an Eved Kanani who is a treifa, and he gets gored, right? He gets gored, so ultimately, again, the master is not entitled to a knas, right? Why? Because the death of the Eved is not really considered to be having deprived the master of something, because Lamaisa, the Eved was going to imminently die anyway. So Gemara says you can have a case. So you can have a case of an Eved who is a treifa. So if you have an Eved who's a treifa, he's not worth anything. Why? Because Lamaisa, again, he doesn't have a current financial value, and even if he were to get gored, that would be an uncollectible knas, because a treifa in halacha is considered to be as if he is already dead. So the Gemara says, 1 second. V'hachazi lemekam kamei. But Lamaisa, even such an Eved still has a value in that he could serve the master. Okay, so I'll say, so now the Gemara is really trying to come up with that with complicated cases over here. So we're talking about, watch this, we're talking about an Eved who is a treifa, which means he's going to imminently die because of a medical condition, and he's also physically repulsive with oozing boils, right? Which means that you really don't want him serving you on a day-to-day basis because Lamaisa, again, just his physical appearance is repulsive, right? And he has no value. So that would be an example of an Eved who doesn't have a value. Okay, so I will say, so therefore the Gemara just points out there is a concept of an Eved who would not have any type of value. So I will say, so halacha l'maisa, we paskin that you can go ahead and sell a future right? The Grandma paskins that you can go ahead and sell such a future right to an entitlement for a knas, because we'll say, how we paskin in a person being able to sell a davar shalom al olam is not necessarily one blanket halacha across the board. It manifests itself in different cases, as you even see from the Gemara. Davar shalom al olam looks different in different situations. Like, for example, the ability to sell fruit that has not yet blossomed, but the tree is there, looks one way, versus the ability to sell a knas, which mamish doesn't even exist at all, looks a different way. So again, just halacha l'maisa, very interesting to see how three different things we're seeing over. Number one, machlokes about davar shalab ali olam. Can you go ahead and assign that? Number two, ultimately again seeing that's the machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon. Next, we emerge with truma. Who's allowed to eat truma of a kohen? Yelid bayis mikne kesef. Common denominator is even if any of those individuals does not have a financial value, they still can go ahead and eat truma. And also ultimately again seeing the concept of an Eved who would not have any type of value, which would be an Eved who's a treifa and mukashrim. Okay, good. Fascinating cases. The Gemara says, it's also a very interesting case. Someone who has a chatzi Eved, chatzi ben chorin. Also, we spoke about this already, and we'll see it again. What does it mean? So remember, you have one Eved, an Eved Kanani, who is owned by two masters, Reuven and Shimon, and one of the partners emancipates his chelik of the Eved. So suddenly you have an individual again who is half Eved, half Ben Chorin. So I'll say the truth is Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin is probably the most relatable case to us in all of Shas, because I'll say who's the Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. We're all the Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin. Right? I will say there's a part of me, ultimately, again, that is an Eved, that is a slave to every single desire, that is a slave to every single want, that is a slave to every single lust and proclivity. And I can't get myself out of it. And yet, there's another part of me that's a Ben Chorin. There's another part of me that is free to soar. There's another part of me that is free to accomplish, that is free to do. And I live with this dichotomy. I live with this tension. I live with this dual identity inside of myself every single day. of being a chatzi eved, chatzi ben chorin. So the Gemara said, Misha chatzi eved, chatzi ben chorin, shekidish bas chorin mahu. So Rabbi said, this is a fascinating case. So imagine the following situation. You have this guy, he's in half eved, he's a half ben chorin, and what does he do? He goes over to a lady, and he says, Jewish lady, and he says, Hariat mikudesh asli betabazu kidas Moshe v'Yisrael. Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you, I just have to tell you, mamish, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. Just, I give you all the bracha, the Amir Hashem, to be able to stand under the chuppah with your children, and just to be able to see a child, be able to say, in this case, my son, to be able to say those words to his kala, right there, and to have a seat for that front and center is just overwhelming thing. Okay, anyway, he's not a chatzi ben chorin. I'm jealous of him. Because the truth is, it's beautiful to see. He's a ben chorin, my son. Mamish, he could just. Okay. Anyway, the Gemara says as follows. So what's the halacha? Intim salomar ben Yisrael shamar lebas Yisrael his kachi lechatziyai mikudesh. So listen, I watch this. Interesting case. Let's say you have a ben Yisrael, right? A Jewish guy who says to a bas Yisrael, listen to the words over here. His kachi lechatziyai, become mikudeshes to half of me. To half of me. So we'll say, by the way, ain't commitment issues gedola mizo, right? Like this guy, stay away from this guy. Right? So he says, become mikudeshes to half of me. To half of me. So actually, interesting enough, the Gemara says, so mikudeshes, they are mikudeshes to chazi lekule, because there is the ability to affect kiddushin with all of him. Now, I both say, here's what's interesting. When a man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to half of me, so ultimately, again, the kiddushin works. Why? Now, the Gemara's lashon is, because he has the ability to affect kiddushin in totality. So even though he's saying, become mikudeshes to half of me, at the end of the day, the kiddushin works for all of him. So I'll say, so what does it, Rashi says, what does it mean when he says, become mikudeshes to half of me? So what is he saying? So Rashi actually says, what he's saying over here is, by the way, I plan on marrying additional women. That's what he's saying, right? So Lashon become mikudeshes to half of me is listen, there's plenty of me to go around, right? I'm willing to give you half, but just understand that there's going to be more people. We're going to be onboarding a couple of more people, in the coming years. So the Gemara says, so it works. So such kiddushin works. So the Gemara says, so what do you see from it? It's actually the chazi mikudesh, it's the chazi lekule. Halo chazi lekule. So we'll say, but in this case over here, where is the chazi ben chorin? Does he have the ability to affect kiddushin with his totality? And the answer is no. Right? The answer is that halacha l'maisa, he does not have the ability to do so. We're getting an early start this morning, Israel. So he doesn't have the ability to affect kiddushin with his totality because he's a chatzi ben chorin. So the Gemara says, "Vimtim salomar." So therefore, again, maybe it doesn't work. Vimtim salomar ben Yisrael mekadesh chatzi isha enim kudeshes. Yet I will say that ultimately, again, what happens if you have a man who is mekadesh half of a woman? Right, that's his case. He's mekadesh half of a woman. Ein mekudesh. That's why the shir bekinyono. Because Rabbi say there's something lacking in his kinyan. Yet vaha eved lo shir bekinyono. But over here by the eved, nothing has been left over, so to speak, in the kinyan. In other words, Rabbi say from the chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin perspective, he is going ahead and being mekadesh as much as he can. So Rabbi say, so the shaila is, what's the halacha? So Rabbi say, this is a good kasha. Chatzi eved chatzi ben chorin, who is mekadesh, a Jewish woman, does the kiddushin work or not? We'll say first wide line, mem gimel amud aleph. My tashma hemis mishechatzi chatzi ben chorin. We'll say if you go ahead and you kill someone who is a chatzi ben chorin, no sin chatzi knas l'rabo. Ultimately, we'll say you give half knas to the master. Half knas. We'll say another case of gorim, right? If ultimately again there was, right, an eved, a chatzi ben chorin who was gored, you give half a knas to the master, the chatzi kofer liyarshav. And we'll say half of the kofer payment, ultimately to the inheritors of the eved. Wow. V'im amrit kiddush of lav kiddushin. I will say, if you say that the chatzi ben chorin cannot affect kiddushin, then ultimately again, yarshin minale. where does he have inheritors from? Or as Rabbi say, the lashon of yarshim only applies to what kind of case, Rabbi say? Of halachically legitimate offspring. Those are yarshim. Right? In other words, Rabbi say, if an Eved Kanani has children with a Shifcha Kananis, although those are his biological children, in halacha, they do not have the status of inheritors. So the fact that now we're talking about someone killed, right, or I should say, or a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin was gored. So now there's a kofar payment to be paid, right? So Lamaisa again, so the Gemara says, give half to the master and half to the Yarshim. If there are Yarshim, this must be a case of Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin who affected Kiddushin with a Jewish woman, and then it worked, and therefore the offspring are considered to be Yarshim. To which the Gemara says, no. Kisha aso treifa. What's the case? The case is where the Eved was not killed. The Eved was not killed, but rather he was made into a treifa. Umay yarshav. What does it mean when it says you give half of the kofar to the Yarshim? Nafshe. It means you give it to him. You give half the kofar to the master, half the kofar to the Eved. That doesn't really make much sense. Amar Rava, shtei tshuvas b'dara. It doesn't make sense. I'll tell you. Number one, chada the yarshav katan. Number one, the Mishnah says yarshav. It says inheritors, I will say. V'od kofer hu v'amrei shlotgish ein mishtalim el la'achar misa. Furthermore, we're talking about kofer, and kofer is only paid after death, not by treifa. Ela amar Rava, roi litol ve'elo. Rather, Rava says what it means is that technically speaking, he is entitled to go ahead and take half, but ultimately, again, he does not collect it. Amar Rava, Kishim Shamakadesh Chatzi Isha Inu Mikudashes. So we'll say the same way. Rava says the same way that when one is Makadesh half of a woman, it does not work. Right, the kiddushin does not work. So kach chatzia shifra chatzia bas chodesh niskacha in kiddushin. So too, ultimately, again, if somebody is mekadesh a chatzi shifra chatzi bas chorin, it does not work as well. Okay, Darash Rabba Bar Rafuna. Kashem Shemakadesh Chatzi Isha Inu Mikudashas. Kach Chatzia Shifcha v'Chatzia Bas Chodesh Niskacha Inu Mikudashas. So Rabba Bar Rafuna also darshan the same way that if you try to be Mekadesh half of a woman, right, it does not work. So too, if you try to affect Kiddushin with a Chatzi Shifcha Chatzi Bas Chodesh, it doesn't work as well. Amar Rav Chisda Mi Dami. I don't see how you compare the cases. Hasam Shibikinonos. So both say, why is it that when you're Mekadesh half of a woman, why doesn't it work? Because there is something lacking in your kinyan, right? There's something lacking. In other words, you are withholding part of the kiddushin. Masha enkein hacha lo shir b'kinyano. Rabbi say when you are mekadesh chatzi shifya chatzi baschorin, is there something lacking in your kinyan? Is there something lacking in your kinyan? No. In other words, I'm being mekadesh all of the part of her that I can, which just happens to be, in this case, half of her, because I can't be mekadesh the shifcha part of her. To which the Gemara says, Hadar okim ra'baravuna amora alei v'darash. So we'll say, so listen to this. So we'll say, here's what's fascinating. So originally, just so you see the progression of what happened over here, so Rabba Baravuna wanted to say the same way that if you're mekadesh half a woman, the kiddushin doesn't work. So too, if you're mekadesh chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin, it doesn't work as well. Then I will say, what happened? Rav Chisda said to him, Rabbi Rav Huna, you're wrong. You are equating these cases, but they're not similar. The reason why chatzi isha doesn't work is because there's something lacking in your kinyan. But in the case, ultimately, again, of chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin, I will say, is there something lacking in your kinyan? No, you're being mekadesh, the totality of the woman, you have the ability to be mekadesh. The difference just is, how much of this woman do you have the ability to be mekadesh? How much? Half of her, only the chatzi baschorin part, but there's nothing lacking in your kinyan. We'll say, you hear the distinction over here? Sometimes in life, you have the ability to accomplish 100%, right? But if you only accomplish 50%, there's something lacking. Sometimes, the 100% only the 100% that you have the ability to accomplish only represents what? 50% of the whole. Well, what does that mean? If Reuven is being mekadesh Rachel's a regular woman, right? And he says, I'm being mekadesh half of you. So I'll say, so that is a deficient kiddushin. Why? Because he has the ability to mekadesh all of her. He's only mekadesh half of her. That's deficient. Masha'enkin, if Reuven goes over to a chatzi shifeh chatzi baschorin, and he says to her, Hari at mikudeshasli. I will say, how much of her is he being mekadesh? How much of her is being mekadesh? How much of her? 50%. But in reality, how much a person be Mekadesh? 100% of what he's able to be Mekadesh. So Rabbi Bar Huna was not making that distinction. Rav Chisda says, you're wrong, you're equating the cases, they're not really equatable. Because in one case, he's being Mekadesh 50% of 100% possible total. In the other case, he's being Mekadesh true, 50% for identity, but that is 100% of what he's able to affect Kiddushin with. And therefore the cases are not comparable. So Rabbi Bar Huna says, listen to this, Rabbi Bar Huna says, Hadar Okim Rabbi Bar Huna Mora Alei V'darash V'machashela Zos Tachas Yadech. Shabbos say quotes over here the pasuk. Quotes over here the pasuk from Yeshaya. V'machashela Zos Tachas. This mistake should be under your head. This stumbling block. Ein Adam Omer Al Divrei Torah Ela Imkein Nechshal Benabos is incredible. So Rabbi Bar Huna said, a person only grows in Torah if they make mistakes. Rabbi say, isn't this absolutely incredible? So Rabbi Bar Huna said, okay, shkoyach, you're right. I made a mistake. I tried to equate the two cases. I'm wrong. Rav Chisda, thank you for pointing that out to me, but I only learn as a result of my mistakes. Rabbi say, what an incredible and overwhelming Gemara. At the end of the day, Ein Adam Omeid Al Divrei Torah, Ela Imkein Nichshal Bahen. The only way, Rabbi say, it's actually interesting. The lashon of omed, a person literally translated means a person could only stand on words of Torah if he stumbles on it. I will say, what's the metaphor? The metaphor ultimately, again, is almost like you could imagine scaling a mountain. Right? What's the goal? The goal is to stand on top of the mountain. How do you get to the top of the mountain of Torah? I will say, it is only if a person is going ahead and falling along the way. Anyone who tries to scale a mountain, right? Let's say, if you're going to climb, there's always that moment where you lose your grip. There's always that moment where, your footing gives out a little bit. It's never just a straight walk up. So the only way, ultimately, you reach the pinnacle of accomplishment is if you are willing to fall along the way. I was saying, it's such an incredible yisod. Because we often, whenever, when we embark upon something, so often we go ahead and we have a little bit of a flawed mindset. And if we encounter difficulty or turbulence or setbacks or we fall down, we often look at that as, I'm clearly going down the wrong direction. Almost as if something is meant to be, it should be easy, right? And if it's challenging, it must mean that it's not meant to be. And it's fakert. It's actually it's the exact opposite. How do you know that you're on the cusp of something great? The more turbulence and the more resistance you face, the greater whatever it is in front of you is. Ultimately, again, the greater the struggle, the greater the accomplishment. And that's what Rabbi Bar Huna is saying over here. Ein Adam Omed Al Divrei Torah, Ela Imkein Nichshal Bahen. Rabbi say, if it comes easy, it's generally not worth having. If you want to accomplish something in life, there is going to be an incredible amount of adversity, an incredible amount of pushback. When it comes to spiritual accomplishment, Torah accomplishment, you are going to stumble. And if you don't stumble, it means you're not going to make it to the top of the mountain. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Even though we said that if you're Mekadesh half a woman, it doesn't work. We'll say, here we go. Wow. But it says the Gemara, if you're Mekadesh, Chatzi Isha, Chatzi Baschorin, it works. It works. Why? My taima, Hasim Shirbikin Yono, Hachalo Shirbikin. Because you'll say, why? Fundamental difference. Because Lamaisa, when you're Mekadesh, Chatzi Isha, Chatzi Baschorin, Abosai, you are being Mekadesh whatever is in your power. Right? The part that's a Shifcha, I can't do anything about. But ultimately, again, I'm being Mekadesh, the woman, the 50% that I'm being Mekadesh in the Chatzi Isha, Chatzi Baschorin case is 100% of what I am able to do. Masha'inkin, in the case, ultimately, again, if we're Mekadesh half an Isha, that Rabbi says 50% of 100% that I'm able to do, that doesn't work. Rabbi say, also another incredible yisod in life. Sometimes in life, your 100% is really only 50% of the total. You see Rabbi say, what's is incredible yisod as well. What's the definition of success in life? Success in life is being able to identify what is it in this particular scenario that I could accomplish, and then again, accomplishing that thing. Sometimes I can't accomplish 100% in a given situation. So let's say in totality, I can accomplish 50% in this situation. Well, that 50% then it becomes the 100%. I'll give you an example. This comes up all the time, like in relationships. Like sometimes in relationships, the ideal relationship should look a certain way. But you know what happens? Relationships often are made up of people, and people are not ideal. So you ever have a situation where I have a relationship, and the best I could hope for in this relationship is for it to be like 30%. 30% of what a 100% relationship would look like. Okay, so what happens now? That 30% becomes my 100%. Sometimes life is like that. That's the chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin dynamic of relationships. That sometimes the most you're going to get out of a relationship is 30%. Okay, so work on getting 100% of that 30%. And that's your 100% of that case. 100. In other words, sometimes accomplishment doesn't always look like an objective 100%. Sometimes accomplishment is just understanding what you could accomplish in a particular scenario and accomplishing that. It's not an objective 100%. You do what you can. That's the chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin dynamic. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. So the Gemara says as follows: Amrav Sheishes Kashim Sham Mekadich Chatzi Isha El Mekudeshes Chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin Shnitzkach in Kedusha Kedushes. What's this? Okay. So now this still subject to machlokes. So therefore, Rav Sheishes says the same way that if you're Mekadish half a woman, it does not work. So too, if you're Mekadish Chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin, it also doesn't work. If in Lachshecha Adam Lomar. Maybe someone's going to whisper to you, but what's the case of a shifra charufa? That would be a case of a chasi shifra chasi baschorin who is me'urasas to an eved ivri. Alma bas isrusehi. You see from here that you are capable of affecting kiddushin with the chasi shivah baschorin. That's not true. So the Gemara says, Amar lo, say to him, Ke'lecha eitz Rabbi Shmuel. Go look at the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel. Shu Omer b'shifcha kinanis ha'me'urasa la'eved ivri. So we're talking about over here shifcha kinanis, who is betrothed to an eved ivri. V'shifcha kinanis bas isrusehi. But is a shifcha kinanis capable of having erusin with an eved ivri? Elama'is t'chalamimar my me'urasas. What does me'urasas mean? Miyuchedes. It means that she is miyuchedes. Miyuchedes means she's set aside. Hachanami my me'urasas miyuchedes. So we'll say point over here is there is a machlokes. So we'll say point is that there is a machlokes. Can you be mekadesh chatzi shivah chatzi b'chashar? So we'll say just want to be clear. Everyone agrees. What can't you do if you're mekadesh half of a woman? We'll say what's the effect of that statement? What's the effect of that statement? Void. We'll say, by the way, contrast that with a man who says to a woman, become mikudeshes to half of me. Does that statement work? Yes, because what is he effectively saying? Right? I'm going to be marrying other women. Right? So again, man is mekadesh half a woman, doesn't work. Man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to half of me. That does work. Machlokes, can you be mekadesh a chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin? The machlokes is still ongoing. Amrav Chisda chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin shnitzkach l'ruvein. Rabbi say, now watch this. Rabbi say, by the way, I just want to point out, how do we paskin? So we paskin that if you're mekadesh a chatzi shifra chatzi baschorin, that ultimately again it works. It works. The kiddushin works. Why? Because you're being mekadesh, although it's only 50%. But it's 100% of what you're able to be makadesh. We'll say next case. Listen to this. Get ready for this one. Because mikudesh to Ruvain. V'nishtachrera. That will say now she becomes emancipated. Mazel tov. Okay. She's really relishing this newfound freedom. So what does she do? She becomes mikudesh to Shimon. Watch this. Umesu shnehem. Right? Really, and after she got the life insurance policy on both of them, mysterious situation, they both passed away. Now what do we have over here? Now we have a yibum case. Yibum case. Don't curl up into the fetal position, start rocking back and forth. Right? It's yivamus. We're going to be fine. I will say, watch this. So what happens? So we'll say now they have a brother. Ultimately, and she does yibum with Levi. Amud Beis, ve'ein anikori ba ishes shnei mesim. Now I will say, now generally again, if a woman has some type of marital bond to two men, that generally precludes any type of yibum situation. But no, here she could do yibum with Levi. Why? The Gemara says, Manavshach, I kiddushin Ruvain kiddushin dishim la kiddushin. Because I will say, if her kiddushin to Ruvain, that was husband number one, is good kiddushin, Then Rabbi say Kiddushin to Shimon was meaningless. The Kiddushin to Shimon, Kiddushin, and if her Kiddushin to Shimon, husband number 2 was Kiddushin, then Kiddushin to Reuven Lav Kiddushin. Ultimately, again, her Kiddushin with Reuven was meaningless. So we'll say, the point that I was making over here is, either way, she could do Yibum with Levi. Remember again, Reuven and Shimon were brothers. But I say either way, she could go ahead and do Yibum with Levi. Why? Because she was married to one of these guys. No matter how you paskin in the case of a man who's Mekadesh, Echatzi Shifech, Echatzi Baschorin, she did definitively have Kiddushin with one of them, and therefore she is subject to Yibum. Incredible. Next. Itmar, Chazi Shifech, Echatzi Baschorin, she is Kachel Reuven. Okay, here we go. So Chazi Shifech, Echatzi Baschorin has Kiddushin with Reuven. Then Ishtachrira, she was emancipated. The Chazra, then is Kachel Shimon. So now watch this. Now she's fully emancipated. And now I will say, what happens? She has Kiddushin with Shimon. So I will say, so what's her status? Now, again, before we were asking, both Reuven and Shimon die, so what's her status al Tzibum? Now I both say, Reuven and Shimon are alive, so ultimately, again, what's her status? So Rav Yosef Bar Chama Rav Nachman, Paku Kiddushay Rishon. Ultimately, we'll say, upon emancipation, the first Kiddushin goes away. Rabbi Zera Rav Nachman, Gamru Kiddushay Rishon. He says, no. In fact, I will say, first Kiddushin, upon emancipation, what happens? First Kiddushin automatically devolves onto her other half. Otherwise, I will say, remember, when Reuven was originally Mekadesh, the Kiddushin only devolved upon half of her. Once she becomes emancipated, ultimately the Kiddushin automatically devolves upon her other half. So I will say, so you hear this machlokes over here? This is really fascinating. So I will say, even if you go at the idea, what is really riveting, if you go at the idea that if you're Mekadesh, Chatzi Shifech, Chatzi Baschorin, okay? So now I will say, what happens? So now upon emancipation, what occurs? So Rav Yosef Bar Chama says the name of Rav Yosef Bar Chama says, according to Rav Nachman, Halacha L'maisa, upon emancipation, the Kiddushin is paka, it goes away. According to Rabbi Zera's interpretation of Rav Nachman, it spreads. So listen to this. So Rabbi Zera says, Kivase didi mistabra. I think I'm right. That ultimately, again, it spreads. Why? Dichsiv lo yumsu kilo chufasha. The pasuk over here talks about a situation, ultimately, again, of a shifcha necharefes leish. This is talking about a shifcha, ultimately, again, who was designated for a particular man. So what happens if a Jewish man has relations with this shifcha, who is designated for another man? So ultimately, again, they're not put to death. It's not called adultery, kilo chufasha, because she was not emancipated. Ha chufasha, if she was emancipated, yumsu, they would be put to death. So we'll say, which sounds like, what are we talking about over here? So the Rabbi Zera is setting this up, is this must be a case of a chatzi shifcha, chatzi baschorin, who ultimately, again, was betrothed, right? There was kiddushin, and talking about upon emancipation, she would be considered to be a fully married woman, which shows that upon emancipation, the kiddushin that originally only devolved upon half of her automatically spreads to the other half. I'm going to Abai Silotan Der Shmuel, Darb Shifcha Kiranas Amuresas LaEvet Ivri, Hachanami. And Rabbi says, according to Tandir Yisrael, who says that this is talking about a Shifcha Kinanis who is Ureses to an Evet Ivri. We said this before. So you're going to tell me that Hachanami Dichi Chufasa Yumsu, even if she's emancipated, ultimately again, she becomes like a married woman. Elamai, is that true? Elamai Istachalamimar, Shechufsha V'chazra V'niskansha. Mostly talking about a case where upon emancipation, she would have to be betrothed again. So to over here, about in the case of Chasi Sheva, Chasi Baschorin, upon emancipation, the Kiddushin does not automatically devolve upon the rest of her. There would have to be another subsequent act of Kiddushin. Listen to this. Was a story with a particular woman. She was half Shiva, half Baschorin. The Kafu Esraba, the Asa Baschorin. And ultimately, what happened? So they forced her master ultimately to go ahead and emancipate her. So the Gemara says, Kiman, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. Ultimately, we'll say, in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, the Amar al Shneihimu Omer vayivarich osam Elokim vayomer Peru uravu milu es haaretz. So we'll say, here's what's interesting about this case over here. So we'll say, so the Gemara says as follows. There's a concept, remember again, when it comes to Chatzi ben Chatzi ben Chorin. We'll say, so remember, Machlok Zeshan Beisilel, what do you do with him? So, right, on one hand you can say, okay, one day operates like a ben chor, and one day operates like an eved. The problem is ultimately he's stuck, right? Why is he stuck? Because he can't fulfill period of arivia. Why not? He can't have children because if he has children with a shivcha, that's not period of arivia, because ultimately again those children won't be Jewish. He can't marry a bas chor. So what do? We emancipate him. He becomes fully free, and this way he has the ability to go and fulfill the mitzvah period of arivia. So the Gemara says over here that same over here, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Rovka says, the mitzvah period of arivia devolves upon a woman as well. And therefore, in the case of a chatzi shifet, chatzi bas chorim, they would go ahead and force the master to go ahead and emancipate the woman in order that she should be able to go and fulfill the mitzvah as well. Shabbos, to which the Gemara says, no, that's not the reason. No, that's actually not the reason. Halacha l'maisa, the reason they forced the master to emancipate this chatzi bas chorim was because, again, people were acting immorally with her. So because ultimately they were acting immorally with her, halacha l'maisa, they wanted her to be able to enter into a regular monogamous marital relationship in order that she should not engage in immoral ways. But l'maisa, again, it was not because there was any type of halachic mandate. So they will say, okay, so bottom line, we're going to stop over here for today. We'll stop at the Mishnah, but tomorrow we're going to start out with the Rambam, because we have this open-ended case. What's the open-ended case? We have to say. So let's go back to what we know, right? Three quick things. Number one, if a man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to half of me, what's the halacha? It works. How do we interpret his statement? I'm going to marry other women, right? Number two, if a man says to a woman, I'm being mikadesh half of you, what's the halacha? Does not work. Why? Shir b'kinyono. He's withholding from the marital kinyan. Number three, if you're mekadesh chatzi shifet chatzi bas chorim, what happens? Halacha l'maisa, it works. Fine. We'll say number four, which is what we're going to start out tomorrow. So what happens upon emancipation? What happens upon emancipation in a situation like that? Does the kiddushin, is it paka? Does it evaporate? Or ultimately, again, does it spread? And Me'er Hashem, that's what we start with tomorrow. So wonderful to be back with all of you. Shkoyach.